every single one of us. So let's take this moment to make this commitment that every single one of us will use our voice and our vote in this democracy to make sure that it is consistent with our interests and our values, and that we're able to look our kids in the eye in the years to come and tell them at this defining moment of truth, we did what was right and we made them proud. That's why I'm running to serve you as president. That's why I'm grateful that you're here today. Gracias. Gracias. I'm going to take questions. Cynthia Carroll's got a microphone.
I have a question. How can I go to college without a bunch of money? Because I don't have a lot of money for college.
Tell me your name. EJ? You did a great job. Let's hear it for EJ. That was awesome, EJ. Thank you. EJ was asking about the ability to afford to go to college. And EJ, you may be asking in part because right now it's really hard for people to be able to go to college. This is a number that I cannot get my head around. There's $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. If you compile all of the outstanding credit card debt in this country of 320 million people, it would not get to 1.5 trillion. And we add to it every single day. Every graduating senior, we were just at Wofford in Spartanburg earlier. Every graduating senior in this country right now, on average, will have about $40,000 on their back. Some a little less, some a whole hell of a lot more. So what do? First, I would argue, let's stop digging the hole. Let's make sure that your first 2 years of college are free, right? No cost to you. Let's make sure that if you're going to pursue a 4-year degree, that it is debt-free for you. And debt-free not just for tuition, but it's expensive to buy those books, if we still have books when you're going to college. It's expensive for where you live, for the food that you eat. So our plan is debt-free for all of the costs for college. And then I want to make sure if you're one of those who has part of that $1.5 trillion in debt, that at a minimum we refinance that at the lowest rates possible. Over the next 10 years, the federal government stands to make in profit $8 billion on interest payments from those who took out student loans. We should not be making money as a country off of those who are investing in bettering themselves in higher education. And then, I talked about how important it is for us to get behind these extraordinary public school educators. Let's make sure that if you dedicate your life or some part of it to public service, teaching in a classroom, working in the VA, where we have 44,000 funded but unfilled positions, which lead to those wait times that Kenneth was talking about. If you're willing to serve this country, let's wipe clean and clear your debt so that you can focus on your service and don't have to worry about making ends meet. And lastly, for those who are not going to go to college, I want to make sure that when you graduate, you are career ready, that we elevate, and this is important to say in South Carolina and in my home state of Texas, the power of unions and the ability to join an apprenticeship. The ability to enter an apprenticeship, you'll learn a skill and a trade. You will do that at no cost to yourself, completely debt-free. You'll be able to fill one of the high-wage, high-skill, high-value jobs that we're creating in this country right now. And if you have been automated out of existence in your job, you're 45 years old, you're beginning that next career, you've just finished raising your kids and you're going to rejoin the workforce, I want to make sure that you can join that union or get to that community college and be ready for what is ahead. What do you think? Yeah. Good? Yeah. All right, thank you. You did
Congressman O'Rourke, I'm the father of a 20-year-old daughter. So what are your plans to ensure that in the future, especially with the makeup of today's Supreme Court, what are your plans to ensure that she has the right to choose what she does as far as her health is concerned?
Thank you for asking the question. We can talk about this from some experience in Texas. Our legislature effectively shut down more than a quarter of our family planning clinics. In the biggest state by landmass in the lower 48, meaning that some people could not drive to a reproductive care clinic, could not easily go out of state to find that. And not only does that mean that you do not have safe, legal access to an abortion, it also means that you cannot get that cervical cancer screening, see that family planning provider, or in a state like ours that did not expand Medicaid, you may not be able to see a provider of any kind. That is not unconnected to a maternal mortality crisis that we are seeing in our state and in this country, 3 times as deadly for women of color. So perhaps the common ground is to acknowledge that family planning clinic, Planned Parenthood, just to name one of the most important ones, is a lifesaver for the women in this country. And that access is their health care, and by extension, very often, their lives. So, as president, we will nominate justices who understand that 1973 Roe versus Wade is the settled law of the land. We will ensure that we work with members of Congress so that by statute, we guarantee that state by state and do not allow any state to exempt itself or the women who live in it from reproductive care and making their own decisions about their own bodies. And then our Department of Justice will side with women in every single courtroom, in every single state in this country, to fiercely and vigorously defend their rights and their health and their full equality in this country. And then lastly, I am going to work with you to make sure that we ratify the Equal Rights Amendment so that constitutionally it is clear that women have equal standing in this country in every single respect. Thank you for asking. Okay.
You were moving toward exactly what I wanted to ask you about. As Abigail Adams said to her husband, what about the women who are not mentioned in the Constitution and make, on average, 80% of what men do?
That's right.
There was a recent oracle, the federal government found that on average women were paid an average of $13,000 less per year than men doing similar jobs.
Yeah.
What about, and on average, women make 80% in the United States, minorities make down to 50%.
That's right.
So what about the women?
Yes. That's right. And, John talked about his 20-year-old daughter. I talked about looking my kids in the eye down the road. How can we account for ourselves in the year 2019? In a country that, unique among the nations of the planet, defined itself not by race or ethnicity or one group's superiority over another, but said in our foundational document that we were all created equal. How can this persist? You mentioned that African American women are paid 61 cents on the dollar for what a white man makes in this country. Latinas, 53 cents on the dollar. As president, I will sign the Paycheck Fairness Act. Let me tell you what that does. It ensures that companies do not punish women for sharing their wage information with other workers so they can understand what's going on and their place in that company and their ability to advocate and fight for themselves and for others. We, importantly, would reduce the prominence of past salary history when setting your salary going forward. If we continue to look at how you have been paid in the past, and you've been paid 61 cents or 53 cents on the dollar, and that's what we'll continue to pay going forward. So making sure we're only looking to the future is incredibly important. And then I mentioned the Department of Justice. Let's make sure that we are vigorously prosecuting those who discriminate in the workplace. If we match that with a fundamental fairness and equality and equity in every aspect of American life, from education to the economy to healthcare, and then have that enshrined in our Constitution, I'm confident that we're going to be able to answer our kids and be proud of what we've been able to do. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
2/3 of the student college debt is women's debt.
I did not know that. She just said that 2/3 of that outstanding student loan debt is held by women in this country. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate that.
So I'm a public school teacher in South Carolina. I'm making money. I make $32,000, which is not great for paying back loans or car payments, anything. And there's recently a state mandate to raise pay to $35,000, so $3,000 raise, call it. The state does not fully fund education, so that's coming out of my school district's budget, which means that my school district is $1.5 million in debt, which means that we have to cut mental health services for students, and we also have to cut SROs in schools, and a slew of other smaller class sizes, all of that. So what is a way that you, as president, and also the federal government can hold states accountable to fully fund education?
You did great. We want to begin by thanking you for your public service. And we just outlined how hard this is, and you're doing it. So thank you. Here's some ways that we can help school districts and the local property taxpayer to fund teacher salaries and public educator salaries, commensurate with the value and the need, and then ensure that you stay in this profession, not just through the first 5 years, but through your working life. Allow you to answer that call that caused you to not take something that would pay higher or be easier, but to answer that call to public service. So there's a program some of you may know about, you certainly do, called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Right now, the federal government funds about 17% of their obligation. Our plan calls for funding the entire obligation, which would require, this is not inexpensive, $20 billion a year additional from the federal government. But that money invested in these local schools frees up resources at the school board level to make investments in deferred maintenance on this building. Maybe an air conditioner would be nice in this room, and teacher salaries, making sure. I just met a special education teacher. Thank you for doing that work. My sister was in special education. We saw how hard her teachers worked and how tough it was when the class size was 30 or 35 kids in that classroom. There should have been 10 or 15 kids in that classroom getting some individualized instruction, but there just weren't the resources at that level. So a federal investment, and I love the way that you pose the question. We cannot reward states for shirking their responsibility. So states have to pony up as well. South Carolina and Texas, two bad actors when it comes to this nationally. And that is despite the heroic efforts of our state legislators who are here, but that Republican majority, we got to work with them, right? My mom is a lifelong Republican, so I love Republicans, and she voted for me in the last election, so I know that we can work with them. But we've got to make the case that this is an investment, right? Not simply an expense. I'll give you an example. If we extended education universally to pre-K, so it began not when you're 4 or 5, when you may already be 10 months behind in reading comprehension on the first day of kindergarten, but move back to 3 or 4 for pre-K universally, again, not an inexpensive proposition, but for every $1 we invest, we get $9 back in terms of economic growth in this country. So let's make that investment in people, in neighborhoods, in communities, and schools. I will make sure as president that we have your back and that we follow your inspiration and your guidance. Thank you for your public service.
To you, I only have time for 2 more.
Your fantasy first executive order would be what?
That is a great question. So it would be an interesting executive order, and I'll tell you why. First, we would reverse the president's decision on deferred action for childhood arrivals. So for more than 1 million dreamers who've cleared deportation. And then interestingly enough, and for the first time in U.S. history, there would be a completely different issue in that same executive order that would reverse the transgender troop ban so that anybody who wants to serve this country in uniform is able to do that. And then I'll just make this the last part of that executive order. I mentioned the existential threat of climate, and that our kids are counting on us, and those same scientists who tell us why we have been warming and how much more we will warm also say that we've got just 10 years left within which to act. And so the clock is ticking. Day one, we would issue executive orders to ban all oil and gas exploration on federal lands off the coast of South Carolina as well. Raise vehicle emission standards and ensure through the EPA and its rulemaking authority that the energy that we produce to keep the lights on, to ensure that this air conditioner is working, that's produced through renewable resources, wind and solar. So thank you for giving me 3 for the 1, but that's where I go. Thank you very much. Very, very grateful. Yeah. Ms. Brown? Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon. Beto, so I'm a chef in Greenville. I make $42,000 a year. I see a lot of media that says that the economy is booming and that unemployment is so low. But so many people that I work with, employees, and myself alike, are just one healthcare expense or a flat tire away from just not being able to function. So moving forward, if the economy is so great, how is it that trickles down to folks like us that are not in those higher brackets?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being here. What's your specialty that you make?
This week it was halibut, pansy, sofrito with peach salsa.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm in. So, this is one of these questions we're going to have to answer for our kids. They'll be reading their history books, and they'll say, so back in 2017 and 2018 and 2019, you had $22 trillion in debt. You were adding to that debt through deficit spending of $1 trillion a year. You were fighting 6 wars that we can name right now in Afghanistan, and Iraq, and Syria, and Somalia, and Yemen, and Libya. You've got tens of millions of your fellow Americans who cannot afford health care, teachers who are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, $4 trillion in outstanding infrastructure needs, like the fact in Denmark, South Carolina, you cannot drink the water there because they need to invest in a new water system. And your response to that, United States of America, was to cut a $2 trillion tax cut that flowed to the very wealthiest at a time of historic wealth income inequality, and to corporations who are already sitting on record piles of cash. So how do we meet that challenge? We make sure we change that tax code to invest in you. So repeal the worst of the Trump tax cuts. Take that corporate rate not back to where it was at 35%, but if you just took it to 27 or 28, you would generate hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. If you taxed capital at the same rate you taxed your wage income or your salary, we would generate hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. And if we use that to make investments in you, to make sure that you caught a break in the tax code so that you can invest in yourself, your family, your future, if we invested in schools, if we invested in healthcare so that it's guaranteed, it's universal, and it is high quality, and that you can afford the medications you need to stay alive, and that if you have employer-sponsored insurance, and you like it, you can keep it. But if you're one of the tens of millions who has no insurance at all, or is insufficiently insured, cannot afford your copay or bridge your deductible, we enroll you in Medicare as well. All of those are investments in people that will produce a return for this country. And so if you really want this economy to thrive, if you really want to be firing on all cylinders, then you're going to make sure that you listen to people, not to corporations, not to the very wealthiest. And that's why this campaign does not take a dime from a single political action committee, lobbyists, corporations, or corporations. We're listening to you. Thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you all very much for having us out here today. Enjoy the rest of the day.